So thanks for being with us on a Friday morning.
Okay, we are now also broadcasting to Zoom.
Great.
Or sorry, broadcasting to YouTube. You know what I meant.
Did you all get some of that tropical storm earlier this week? Did it pass up through Sacramento? Nope.
It's cloudy here today. I think there's a storm moving over the Sierra, but it's apparently not going to, we're not going to get any rain here.
We had a nice lightning show actually last night.
Oh,
I know.
Hey, all, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Dorian. How are you?
morning.
I'm good. Just came back from a little walk. Feeling good.
Excellent. Happy Friday. Hi, Nathaniel.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Let's get going. We heard from Thea that she will be about 15 minutes late due to a just morning conflict, but we can get started since we've got quorum and I need to go through the beginning portion of our meeting anyway. Does that sound good to you both? Silent thumbs up. Okay, I'll take it.
Yep.
Okay, great.
That works.
Good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us today. This is a meeting of the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force, Goal 2 Subcommittee. Goal 2 is focused on protected and thriving agricultural lands. My name is Megan Wiley. I'm with Sacramento State University and I provide facilitation support to the task force. I'm joined this morning by colleagues from the California Strategic Growth Council, Tessa Salzman and Camille Frazier. We might also have Sean Kennedy join us at some point this morning as well. So we will be supporting the task force and taking notes along the way to develop a meeting summary afterwards. This group is scheduled for 2 hours this morning, so we've got until 11 a.m. Before we begin, it's helpful to remind us that the task force was established in the California Budget Act of 2022 via Assembly Bill 179. It's a 13-member task force, and they are an independent body directed to submit a report by January 1st, 2026 to the Legislature and Governor that includes a set of policy recommendations on how to address the agricultural land equity crisis. Task force members are working to finalize this report of recommendations by the deadline, and so far we're on schedule, which is great. They've been working together for just about 2 years now. We've had numerous meetings, numerous site visits across the state, many guest speakers, presentations, and community engagement sessions all across California. And so the content of this report is informed by a robust outreach efforts and a lot of research. We follow standard participation guidelines in all of our meetings, and these participation guidelines apply to everyone who's joined today, whether that's a task force member, a staff member, or a member of the public if you're tuning in. In all of our meetings, we respect diverse perspectives, encourage inclusive participation, and use courteous language. All speakers must be respectful, considerate, and on topic so that we can create a safe, respectful, and inclusive space for a meaningful discussion. That includes avoiding editorials or ascribing motives to certain comments. All interests and points of view have value, and it is perfectly wonderful to not be in alignment with each other. And in fact, sometimes some very robust ideas come out of initial disagreements. It is very helpful that if you are not in alignment with an idea, that you offer a constructive alternative, a different way to possibly approach a concept. We do offer public comment for all of our meetings. We've got three public comment periods today. They are in alignment with the different agenda sessions. And there's a general public comment at the end of our meeting. You are welcome to complete a form for each agenda item if you would like to issue comment on that particular item at sgc.ca.gov/meetings-events. And that we will know you want to get in the queue. And then you can also use your raise hand feature on Zoom, and that we will note that you'll want to get in the discussion queue as well, at which point in time staff will unmute your microphone and allow you to share your comment with us. And we do request that folks stick to a 2-minute timeline, and I will, of course, help us stay on time. Zoom tips. So folks are muted upon entry. We'll let you unmute when it's your time to speak. Cameras are optional. It's nice to see smiles. And where do you find your raised hand feature? That depends. Sometimes it looks like a raised hand. Sometimes it's underneath a reactions icon that could look like a heart or a smiley face, possibly a star. We're not sure. I do want to note that you'll see the chat available, but it is only for technical needs. It is not for conversation. So if someone is having an issue, if a task force member is having a technical issue, they can inform staff and we'll try to support and remediate on the back end. But please, subcommittee members, keep your conversation in the Zoom room. Our plan for this morning is to review and approve the summary from this group's first meeting, which was held on September 2nd. And then we'll go into a working session to discuss an advanced development of the draft goal and the sub goals for potential inclusion in the draft report. Before we close out, what we always do is review an action item and check in on any follow-up tasks and deadlines. And then there will be space for general public comment at the end of our meeting. During the general public comment time, folks are welcome to comment on anything related to task force business generally. Let me take a quick roll call to establish quorum. Task force member Dorian Payan, please say good morning.
Good morning.
And task force member Nathaniel Brown.
Good morning.
Fabulous. Quorum is established. Task force member Thea Rittenhouse plans to join around 9:15, and we will note for the record when she arrives. Okay, let's launch into it. Oh, I think we forgot a slide for agenda, review and approval of the minutes. So let me just back it up one quick moment, and I can pull up the draft summary up on screen and invite some conversation. If Nathaniel or Dorian, did you have any proposed revisions to the meeting summary from September 2nd?
No proposed revisions on my end.
Yeah, no revisions either.
Okay, so there's only 2 of us, so we're going to have to do a very quick motion to approve and a second. Who would like to motion to approve?
I motion to approve the minutes. Or the agenda, sorry.
I second that motion.
Wonderful. Let's just check to see if there's any public comments on the draft meeting minutes. Anything come in via public comment form? Okay.
Sorry,
Then take a roll. No public comment. So there's a motion and a second to approve the draft meeting summary as written. If you support this motion, please say aye. Member Dorian Payan.
Aye.
And member Nathaniel Brown.
Aye.
Wonderful. The minutes are approved as written, so we will finalize and get those posted to the project website and share it out next week. Okay, working session time. I am going to invite Tessa to initiate this conversation for us.
Actually, it's going to be me, Megan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Camille. So
Yeah,
we'll
no
continue
problem.
on similar to our first session about 10 days ago. We'll go through the goal to revisions and discussion items, and then hold in your mind, of course, the order of recommendations and scope and level of detail contained therein. And take it away, Camille.
Megan. Thanks for being here this morning, everyone. I did want to note, as we jump into our discussion, that we do have an advisory committee member. Catherine Ledan is listening in to this session and is there if the members of the subcommittee do have any questions that we feel might be valuable to have Catherine's expertise. Just noting, thanks Catherine for tuning in and just making that offer to subcommittee members as you're starting a conversation. If there is anything that maybe advisory committee could assist with, we have support. Thank you very much, Catherine, for all the work you've done for this task force. If we can move forward a slide, Megan. So very quickly, wanted to report back on the revisions that were discussed in this subcommittee's first meeting, which we just saw that meeting summary. And noting that these revisions have been made based on that discussion. So now the recommendation 2.2G references the City of Davis's program, and then in that recommendation also notes a process for offset if land is to be developed, where the further that offset land is from that original parcel that is being developed, the more land must be conserved. So just noting that that language is now in that draft report as the subcommittee had discussed. And also noting 2.2H now has those recommendations that this subcommittee confirmed should be moved into the draft report regarding cropland repurposing. So highlighting those two changes for subcommittee members. Are there any comment, and you have this language and it will also be made public as part of the meeting materials for members of the public who wish to review. Are there any comments from subcommittee members about either of these changes?
No comment on my end.
No comment.
All right, thank you. So if you'll move forward one slide, Megan. So these are things that are in the draft language that were sent to you based on external feedback we received from advisory committee, interagency review. And so these are just things that we sent to you in the language for you to review and then planned to point them out to you here and discuss them with you. So the first of those is in 2.2A, it called for organizations to receive funding in order to purchase land and then lease or sell it to, qualified entities, to priority producers and land stewards. We received a note that if you look at the language in 8524, for example, it's generally used lease or transfer, which might mean sell, but it might also mean give. And so the comment there that came from the advisory committee would be transfer allows for more flexibility. And if an organization, let's say a land trust, does receive funding from the state to purchase land with the intent that that land then goes to a tribal nation or to a priority producer land steward, requiring them to sell that land to that tribe or that individual doesn't necessarily align. So transfer is a more broad and kind of better aligned word. Wondering if there are any other comments or reasons why that change to lease or transfer is not the preferred change that you would like to make. Or does this change feel more representative of the flexibility that the task force was hoping to achieve? And if it's helpful to pull up this language, that's also maybe good. Nathaniel or Dorian, yeah, go ahead. You both unmuted. Nathaniel, go ahead, then Dorian.
No, I'm looking at it now.
Okay.
I do agree that lease or transfer allows for more possibilities. I guess just thinking on the other end, but because it doesn't specifically say sell, like does that, and I think this is more a question to Dorian, of like, does that restrict in some ways the ability to like sell to a priority producer? Yeah. But I like that the transfer should allow for more, but just trying to flag that. Does it really though? But
Yeah,
it
thanks.
seems like it.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Yeah, what are you thinking, Dorian?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think transfer feels more expensive, uh, because I can imagine it could also involve other property rights, particularly like maybe some sort of covenant or easement. And then transfer, I think, doesn't have to go through the, yeah, it can be like a charitable transfer, for example, versus like having to sell, depending on the agreement. So I like it. It doesn't preclude sell, which is good. It just actually creates more space for it. But yeah, that's a good question, Nathaniel.
We could consider revising this to lease, sell, or transfer, or perhaps lease, transfer, or sell, or, you know, if you'd like to like explicitly call out that option, or we can leave this lease or transfer. Dorian and Nathaniel, do you have a preference? Would you like to put sell into that list or leave it as lease or transfer?
What immediately pops up for me is the spirit of the preservation, and I feel like sell wouldn't be my main objective of this goal. It would be for sure to have it be stewarded by another entity versus to offload it in a way. I think transfer being able to encapsulate cells connotes like more collaboration for me. But I'm curious to hear what Nathaniel thinks.
Yeah, I appreciate that, like, the way you put that. I was looking at it like, all right, because we are naming the stewardship of California's privately held agricultural land, that um just thinking from um different organizations and like their actual ability to do that or like make a sale to or make a transfer. So I think that, you know, if transfer encapsulates s- the sale as well, then we should be fine. And it does, like you say, encourage more uh collaboration. And the seems more like it will be a just sale. So I think if we can establish and know that sell is under transfer, then we should be good with lease or transfer. And then protect to preserve.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nathaniel. Is it helpful if I give a bit more context on this recommendation here to consider it, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I
The
guess
text
my
preserve.
question was it just the like the title for 2.2 that's like preserve instead of protect and steward?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So to confirm, we'll use lease or transfer language and just acknowledge that sell is kind of part of transfer as an option there. The next point, change protect, preserve are another word. So this again came from advisory committee feedback. There were a few members who spoke to this point. The guidance was that the word protect has been used in the context of things like the Williamson Act or other kind of existing frameworks in ways that are more about kind of holding land zoned as agriculture and less about the stewardship of that land. It's just about kind of protecting it without then thinking about what that land is, what it does, and being more flexible and I guess maybe better aligned. The word preserve was suggested as a better aligned, kind of more comprehensive understanding of what it is to steward land. So that was a recommendation. We wanted to make sure to share that with you. You know, and we wanted to see whether you as subcommittee members had any strong feelings here. And yeah, just get your thoughts on this. We did change it for your review in the briefing materials for today, so you could see it and get a sense of whether you liked that change. hopefully that's enough kind of context there. Happy to say more if what I said isn't quite clear, but any initial responses to that? Hopefully that helped a bit, Nathaniel.
Yeah, I mean, initial response, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Dorian, do you have any like response or feelings on this word and making sure Thea's not here? Yeah. Any response?
Yeah, I also like this language. I appreciate the advisory committee for flagging it. I think, especially given the context of the Williamson Act, when we use preserve, it does bring up like freezing something in time, especially in its like historical or open space value. And I feel like preserve also allows us to move towards, or not foreclosing the possibility of what preservation is going to look like in the future, especially as we're increasing land equity and, there's different stakeholders on the land and preservation. I feel like it just leaves the idea of protection to expand with the use of preservation, and I like that.
Yeah, you're totally right. It does. It's expansive in the same way that the transfer is to sell. So I like it.
Well, thank you both for considering these. I know they're small changes, but I do think they are a matter of aligning, the entirety of the task force's goals with very specific passages. So thank you for considering that. We will make sure we're using the word preserve rather than protect, and we will use this lease or transfer. Thanks for talking through that. Megan, if you will please move forward. Okay. So in the last meeting, another recommended change was to primarily retitle the different sections of Goal 2 to make it very clear that a set of recommendations are about public land and a set of recommendations are about private land. And really to highlight that those are two pathways for this broader, we're using the word conservation here. I feel like we've got to stay consistent and maybe use preservation, right? Agricultural land preservation and stewardship, focused on access for priority producers and land stewards. So that has been done. It might be worth, Megan, when you get a chance, let's maybe take a look at those titles, like the document that the task force has been reviewing for this meeting. And as you're taking a look at this, so one question is, do these sort of section titles make it more explicit that we're offering up public land and private land? And then so Megan, if you scroll down a little bit, so we have 2.2, preserve and steward California's privately held land. And then if you'll go down a bit further, well, a lot further, preserve and steward California's publicly held land. So trying to really make it clear, these are two pathways with their own unique recommendations under each. So there's one question is, does this work for you? Does this address your feedback? And then the other question is, if you'll scroll up a bit, Megan, sorry, you gotta go back up to the top. That 2.1 right now is very brief. It says, develop a statewide agricultural land. We have the word conservation plan. That's been the word that has been used in the past in drafts. I am wondering whether you would like to, whether Goal 2 is in fact laying a framework for that plan. So that Goal 2 is actually statewide plan for preserved and thriving agricultural land. And then the context section says pretty much what A says. Here are pathways for private land, here are pathways for public land. Both of these things need to be part of the state's agricultural land conservation plan. So in other words, you're kind of getting rid of 2.1 and you're just making that the context section for this goal. And it is the goal that this task force is laying out. I hope that makes sense. And it is a question that I think would change the tone of this goal and this recommendation. Are these the foundation for this plan? I hope that this is making sense. Any immediate responses, Nathaniel or Dorian, and I'm happy to say more if what I said isn't quite clear yet. Go ahead,
It seems
Nathaniel.
clear. That that does make sense because we don't like have a time. We don't have the time to create a full statewide agriculture land conservation plan, but these are the like suggestions that we're making for two large buckets of land, which is privately held land and public lands, and our recommendation can be the like start of a plan or the start of a creating that plan, but I don't know if we want to lose the plan piece because
Okay.
I don't know, or like, can we suggest yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to hear what Dorian says.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Dorian, did you have any thoughts here?
Could I see the recommendation again, just the way that it's structured? Um, and and also just like the goal of this again. Is it?
Do you mean this, Dorian, or do you mean
Yeah, yeah, this is
okay.
perfect. Okay, yeah, gotcha. So
So
it's
yeah.
just, yeah, go for it.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, right now, goal 2 is preserved and thriving agricultural land. And I'm wondering if we just said goal 2 is statewide plan for preserved and thriving agricultural land, if that 2.1 isn't necessarily doing anything, then 2.1 is 2 and private and public become 2 pathways for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just so basically just kind of refining the language so to eliminate some redundancies. Uh,
Well, if you agree that, Megan, I think maybe switching back to that text now when
Well,
you get a chance. Go
hold
ahead,
on.
go ahead.
It would be like statewide plan for preserving thriving agriculture land, not like
Okay.
a plan for the stuff that's already preserved. Um, right? That's what you all meant. Statewide plan for preserving thriving agriculture land.
That's a good question. Dorian, what's your response to that?
Sorry, I was like halfway in my thought. So Nathaniel, you're saying it's, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go back. Okay, yeah, statewide plan for preserving thriving agriculture land. Basically,
Preserving.
because conservation of it is too broad, or not broad, it's too limited to like rights and like building and, conserving in that way, wildlife and what have you, but preserving can give more of an opening towards like, hey, preserving means allowing people to put up some panels and update the well and then, do some other things to make sure that agricultural land stays thriving. Sorry, I went on a tangent there, but preserved for thriving agriculture land or preserving for thriving agriculture land. I just think it sounds weird the way
Yeah,
it,
it's a bit chunky or a bit clunky, I guess is the right way to put
yeah.
it here. We can keep playing around. I'm not sure, Dorian, if you have any response to Nathaniel's proposal. I guess the question that would be helpful right now to hear from you both is, do you want us to maintain 2.1 as create a statewide plan for agricultural land? Or do you want to remove 2.1 and just make sure that section is part of the context for goal 2? And if right now it's feeling like 2.1 is doing no harm, let's just maintain the structure, that's fine too. I just wanted to note that, this is a bit of a reframe that is a possibility and see if you liked it or prefer to stay the course. Megan, will you put up, please, the existing language when you get a chance, just so they can see what 2.1 says? There you go. Thank you.
Thanks. So I think if 2.1 is captured overall within goal 2, I don't see a problem with it. Um, but I do feel like there is benefit, especially as we're talking about maybe like public lands, that uh, there be an emphasis on a plan just so that it's not sort of happening as funds are available. But I do like the sort of comprehensive nature of it, especially as we're talking about prime agricultural soils and really laying out like a concrete map for it. But I think if that can be captured overall in goal 2, then I don't see a problem with taking out goal 2.1.
Any guidance there, Nathaniel?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I do think that yeah, I do feel like it all seems like a plan, but it's not yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Dorian. It's not, we don't want it to be just when funds are available. And then in the like beginning of 2.2A, it's like establish a new fund. Um, but a plan, to preserve the thriving agricultural lands and soils could just be like naming those spaces and naming the different um zones or like how conservation land trusts and different things look at land is with all these different lenses, and one of them being just like the ability to grow crops there. And if we're able to map more of that out, I know that there are already maps. So like, again, not trying to be redundant, but like putting that preservation piece into plan in just like the goal 2 description, I think is good enough. Or not good enough, but like it sets the stage of like then 2.2 and 2.3 are how you make those plans.
Yeah, your comments there, Nathaniel, just made me think that perhaps this 2.1, as the task force refines the discussion that is being had in other subcommittees about the land market monitoring program, which is kind of morphing into goal 3, subcommittee talked about this, morphing into really a tracking land, mapping lands, understanding lands that are at risk of development, where is development happening. All of that might actually, if we can then reference in 2.1 that other recommendation the task force has, we might actually be able to build out that 2.1 to be not just exactly a repetition of the other ideas, but to call out other pieces of your recommendations that have to be part of the developing of that plan. So maybe what I'm asking you right now is a bit premature. Maybe if you, Nathaniel and Dorian, think it's a good idea, maybe what staff could do is think what other elements of the October draft could bolster this 2.1, really like, here are the tools, they're ready for you, here are the other recommendations, get going on this plan. That might make it feel like more why there's a separate kind of goal. Does that sound like an okay plan? Basically, staff can look through the report and see what else could be added to 2.1 that could reference these other pieces to encourage an easier uptake of this project by the legislature or the governor. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, go ahead, Dorian.
Yeah, that works, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do is, in the October draft, staff will do our very best to reflect the conversation that you both just had, and of course, reduce redundancy when it's unneeded, but also to pull from the report so that it's referencing other elements. And then in October, just please do make sure that you look at that language, and then Hugh can provide further guidance, of course, on whether we've adequately addressed your ideas. Are you feeling good on this particular point? The plan?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you both. Megan, if you could go, I believe I know where we're headed next, but if you'll go to slides and just check that for me. Okay, and we're gonna jump right back to that document. But I want to draw your attention to the revisions we made to the context section in our last subcommittee meeting, as well as building from the August task force meeting. There was really an interest in making sure that the task force acknowledges and balances both stewarding land in the public domain, and then also making sure that there are other recommendations about for those who do, if ownership opportunities are going to be decreased by land in the public domain, making sure that producers have other ways to have stable, dignified livings and retirement. There was a conversation about ownership being so critical for retirement, because that's often how people can sell the land to retire. So we've tried to create some language. If you'll go, Megan, please, to the draft for their review. We've tried to add a paragraph that kind of clarifies this relationship. So please scroll up. And then you see this one method. So it says one method preserving California's prime farmland. And at the end of that paragraph, it ends with any effort to increase public land holdings need to also be accompanied by other strategies for ensuring farmers are able to make a living and securely retire. So I don't know if it would be helpful to take a moment to just read that paragraph. Maybe that's a good way to do it. And then we're just wondering if you have any comments on whether this is representative of the conversation so far.
I think that I think this is a very very needed like piece in there, because it's hard to get the farmer who their land around them is being developed, and they should be able to sell, not should be able to, but like they have the option to sell it for a higher price to not a farmer and let that agriculture go away in that area. And I think that's the hard part, because conservation tends to be like, well, if it's within a city limit, then, or like closely adjacent, well, no, if it's within a city limit, even if it's small town, there is pushback towards like doing that before they sell it. They're, wanting to get the full dollar out. But if there was more like peri-urban preservation going on of these like high class soils that, grow these different specialty crops that aren't just the, main things that get onto our crop lists, I think there could be some benefit or some like transfer bridging that could happen, out of that. But it's an important part to like acknowledge as like who we're, looking to be getting that private land that's already under agriculture stewardship. Yeah, sorry, that was a little bit of a mouthful, but it just I've talked with farmers recently even, and it's just been like, oh wow, like you're totally against putting it under an easement because like even just think they're thinking of the next farmer like already like, well, how's the next farmer gonna retire?
Mm.
So just knowing that's kind of the view for a lot and acknowledging that can like I think help uh show the need for that like fund, or like maybe it's more of a fund that is like an easement, but it's more like, hey, uh it's yeah, I don't know. Agriculture versus conservation easement. I think that there could be some more just dive into the lands that are good soil that aren't necessarily possible to conserve.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that, Nathaniel. Dorian, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about this a little bit, and I'm wondering, I'm feeling a little bit of pause on like this language making it feel like it's contingent. Like if we're going to increase the public domain of agricultural land, it should be contingent on the fact that there's alternative avenues for ensuring farmers can retire. Um, and so maybe like even entertaining like a like a must versus like a should. I don't want that contingency to sort of make the I think the well-intended impacts of like increasing public farmland to just be a DOA, because it's like, well, we can't really have public farmland unless we have an alternative avenue. um, I think it's good to unlock public use of public public lands for agriculture, and also definitely keep on the horizon the fact that it's like, yeah, land is the big incentive of ownership is the fact that you'll be able to retire from it at the end of it. And I don't think that's exclusive to agriculture, right? I mean, I think that's the reality for most people. That's like the nest egg for most people. And so I think it's a reality to sort of identify, but I still think it's worth creating or supporting the expansion of the public domain of agriculture, because it also just, I think, opens a possibility for different businesses to develop, businesses that otherwise, don't have, um, because of the high entry barriers, don't have the ability to develop in the way that maybe they could. So yeah, I'm in favor for it. I think it's super great that we're making note of it. Like this is part of the crisis. People want to retire, or why we're in a cyclical crisis of unaffordable land is because it becomes a nest egg for people. But I think I'm also wanting to focus more on like what we're actually doing to make sure that people can engage in agriculture versus, how they can retire. Because um, yeah, there's also something about the fact that, um, some people aren't going to farm for the rest of their lives, right? Like it might be a stint in agriculture, and that should be a possibility that they can take on. But maybe they don't end up doing that, right? So I don't want to foreclose the possibility of just agriculture becoming more accessible because, they might not be able to retire. Because that's a problem that we all share, right? Like I don't know how I'm going to retire, and I'm not actively farming right now. So, yeah, I just want to mention that point, of like, I think it's great to identify, but it shouldn't be written as a contingency for sure of like only if we can make sure that people can retire from agriculture alternatively.
Okay. That's really helpful context there, Dorian. And I'm thinking an immediate change that could be made to this paragraph is that last sentence, all efforts to increase public land holdings must be accompanied. I think that's what you picked up on. So if we can change that language to efforts to increase public land holdings should be accompanied by, does that feel, is that enough of a change to make this feel less like a contingency idea as you were describing, Dorian, or are there other revisions to this that you would recommend?
I think that works for me. I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to take attention away from the fact that, yeah, retiring is really challenging, and there's only limited ways to do that. Yeah, so I think should, feels better for me, just so that it doesn't foreclose the conversation on expanding the public domain of agriculture.
I understand that, and I'm wondering too, and maybe this is just something to reflect on. I think what I was hearing you say, Dorian, is yes, that there's a critical relationship between public land holdings and retirement. But I hear you saying retirement is an issue regardless of whether we're talking about public land holdings. So I'm not sure at this point whether that kind of level of consideration is if there's another place, I guess, in this report where that story needs to be told in a way it's not being told. So I don't think we can solve that right now in this subcommittee meeting. We'll change this language to not kind of set up this contingency, but rather be an encouragement or an offer. But otherwise, just, I guess, a note that might be something to continue thinking about.
Yeah,
oh yeah, go ahead, Nathaniel.
I do agree with the not having a contingency or that must language makes it sound like a contingency. And it kind of reminds me of the discussion we had at the last task force meeting with the I think it's part of goal 3.1 with the where there was a sort of ratio, and it's like we don't necessarily want to suggest that because then it's a little bit too yeah, it doesn't leave as much room for flexibility and to get public land holdings going to create more examples of how it actually could be done.
All right, thank you both for considering this language. We will make that change for the October draft as we just described. And then this will of course come to the task force again. So there's actually my next comment, and Thea, welcome, I see you've joined. My next comment is kind of a preview of what I believe is going to need to be a longer conversation in October that is directly related to what we were just talking about. So Megan, I'm sorry, you're doing a lot of switching today. Do you mind switching back to the slides? One more, thank you. So we're noting it's directly related to the idea, to the recommendation of increasing public land holdings. So providing now some feedback that has come through interagency review, as well as task force member conversations and working groups and subcommittees. And I do not think that the three subcommittee members here today should be responsible for making this decision, but I wanted to bring this to your awareness so that maybe you can provide some guidance on how to structure a conversation about this in October. To say a bit more, the interagency review recommended against including language about increasing public land holdings, appreciated the recommendations related to effectively stewarding publicly held land, but they provided feedback. Again, these are interagency reviewers, this is just feedback for your consideration, that increasing public land holding would not be the most effective tool to achieve the task force's goals. I know the task force has had a lot of conversations about this, but just sharing with you, The specifics of what the interagency reviewers noted is that the word cost here, the costs of increasing public land owners outweigh the benefits. There's the fiscal cost, but there's also infrastructure needs, timelines, right? In addition to then laws and regulations that once land is public might in fact make it harder for that land to be stewarded effectively by priority producers and land stewards. So the recommendation from the interagency reviewers was lean more into your, your third party landholders, your land trusts, these others who are maybe more flexible and able to be responsive to specific needs of priority communities. Okay, so that's one piece to consider. And then also there's been some task force feedback since the August meeting that was really sharing that state and local governments at this point are ineffective, and federal as well was noted, at stewarding their existing public lands. So it does not feel appropriate to recommend an increase, given that existing lands are not stewarded well. So I'm sharing that feedback with you because I do think that this is probably something the task force will want to consider. And I'm wondering if there are any immediate responses from this subcommittee or any guidance to staff on how you might like to have a conversation about this in October.
Yeah, so I appreciate this concern. I think it is I think talking about public lands, especially I think when uh, we maybe we've been out of touch in, uh, thinking that whether or not, the public domain or like the government has the ability to be an effective steward. I think it's challenging to think of it in this age, right? Where especially when conservation land trusts prevail, and like private conservation prevails. So I want to know where like this sort of cost benefit analysis is coming from. And I'd want to know like in what way public landholding costs outweigh the benefits, because I'm thinking of the way that land is currently conserved right now, and I feel like that's actually more costly than than holding land in, publicly. So I'm just trying to get a better understanding of this cost benefit analysis. State and local governments, I don't think they're ineffective. I think they're out of practice, right? I mean, of course, within the current capacity that we have, they're not going to be effective at stewards. But I think this is part of the recommendations that we're developing, is developing that capacity to be more effective land stewards. Following, I think, an era of shrunken government spending, and like the fact that like the regulatory sort of role of the state has been greatly diminished. And so I'm just trying to think of like that needs to be taken into consideration too. And it's not ahistorical, right? Like I think we're sort of in the aftermath of an era where that is we've been taught to think that government isn't effective, but it's only because it's been neutered in so many ways. And so I'd want to know, like, how are we creating that cost benefit analysis of the costs versus the benefits, and then what the alternative would be. Because I'm still, as I'm thinking of land trust, of course, things like community land trust, they are increasingly in the domain of agricultural land, and that's kind of great because that's actually showing a path for community-based organizations to have land tenure and then to use it for community use. But if I'm thinking of conservation land trust, I mean, they're mostly just handling easements. I mean, that's like the bulk of their work. And so I would just want to see like in what ways would private land be more effective. I think those are the two things that I'm holding right now. Yeah, I'll let other folks talk while I gather some other thoughts.
Thanks, Tom. Nathaniel, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna pause and
Oh,
see
that's
if
also
Thea
fine.
wanted to hop in.
I think I agree with what Dorian said, and we just discussed this yesterday in another subcommittee group with Emily. So I think I'm not sure if we already have that kind of information from our advisory committee or not, if that's contained in there, or any existing research to point at the cost benefit or not.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Thea. So that came from interagency reviewers, and I do not have, I could go back to reviewers and sort of ask if they could provide maybe a bit more detail about what feels like the biggest barriers. I'm the one who used the phrase, the cost of increasing public landholdings outweigh benefits, because the way that it was positioned by interagency reviewers was the infrastructure needs that it would take to be able to effectively oversee and manage land to ensure it wasn't being abused at different levels is like a capacity that feels impossible. It was kind of a, I think the cost benefit analysis I do not have, in other words. And if this task force has its own understanding of that, then you do not need to use this one. But really the interagency reviewers who spoke to that were, I think, mainly focused on probably their own experiences as program administrators who are trying to manage conservation programs in the state, and the challenges with having, again, these are state employees, having effective state oversight, evaluation, responsiveness to situations that are evolving on the ground. So I think that is probably what this person was speaking from. If we are interested, if this subcommittee would like maybe a bit more detail, I can request that and then just include that as part of October, whatever it feels comfortable to share from reviewers. Or maybe this is not necessarily aligned with what the task force feels is to be true in terms of possibilities that you are sketching out or imagining or proposing, which is also fine. I just want to make sure that we are giving you the tools you need to have the conversation that you want to have.
I just wanna say I appreciate Dorian you saying, this isn't, yes, in the capacity now, just looking at public entities or like public governmental entities, being able to steward land. I do think there is a main problem with cities like incorporated cities who have more money and less ag land would be like more suitable to hopefully run and steward urban agriculture, which I would hope and want to push for, because when we look at public land, that's a whole lot of different things. But we did see, from the farmers up there in Humboldt, it's hard to get things done, but if you're willing to risk, putting your own money into public land, then, they'll continue to work with you. Counties with more unincorporated land and probably more land to hopefully get farmers on probably have, less money to put towards those things. And the other part that I really appreciate you naming, and what I was kind of trying to say earlier, is like conservation easements and land trusts, they're not necessarily going to buy land and then sell it or lease it. For sure, they're not trying to lease it. That was one of the main reasons. I mean, we had looked, we as in Ujima Farmer Collective we had looked to local land trusts to, hold it for us for a long term. But it's more the, the easement being held long term. So like as a community-based organization, like we're leasing it over long term, and it does take a lot of infrastructure and a lot of money, but that brings me to the like costs versus benefits, and like it's it's difficult. I don't know that anyone is going to be able to have a really broken down understanding of what it means to push the front line or like push these different ideas to like make them work. But I do th I would argue that the benefits are um it's like seeds and plants. It's like you plant one seed and then you get 1,000 seeds later, and or depending on on what you're growing. But I do feel like the costs up front are a lot, but the benefits over time are going to outweigh. And so like if we do a simple cost analysis, a simple cost analysis, it's going to say, yes, this costs more money than we have right now to do that in every situation. But I do think, and maybe, yeah, I'll land my plane there. But I just was trying to bring in, some of the just lived experience of like doing and making, the land available. It does take a lot, but it is also uh not not that much money when you think about it um large scale. And if we were to give everyone, private land and like have to do all this different things, like I do think it's worth putting in recommendation to consider and make models for.
I want to leave space. I'll go. Just wanted to check if Thea had anything else to say. Okay. Yeah. I just want to say, I think I kind of started blurting without really parsing out my thoughts and realizing that, these two points of feedback, one is interagency, one is task force related. And so I think that is actually really helpful for me to like consider. So I want to reiterate my point, but I think I want to do it with a little bit more, a little bit more finesse, and especially, and yeah, I appreciate you naming, Camille, like, the sort of costs, or the costs and benefits is the way that you were summarizing interagency review. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm not like, where's the cost benefit analysis? I'm okay with like letting that go. Um, and I appreciate you summarizing this for us. But I do just kind of want to like reiterate, I feel like if an existing public agency is being told to do something, they're going to operate within their own existing capacity of whether they can accomplish a goal. And so that's something that I'm holding right now is like if an agency is being told to do extra work, but the infrastructure is also not being reconsidered of like what existing infrastructure is there and how it needs to be elaborated. I can see, myself as if I were to be a public if I'd be an employee at a public agency, I'd be like, we absolutely can't do this. And so I just kind of I just want to make that point of like, of course it's not, it's not going to be um, feasible. And I think similar to the feedback of the task force, I think we have said, yeah, the state and local governments are ineffective at stewarding existing public lands, but I really do think it's because there hasn't been the investment in it, so there isn't the capacity to do an effective job at stewarding land. I think one of the things that I just also want to reiterate about increasing public land holdings is that it also increases the democracy of them because it actually subjects governance to like a democratic process, in that, this is like the state running the process versus public agencies who might have limited oversight, or, we might sort of have limited engagement in how they're doing the work. And it might relate to some of the other recommendations we have, right? Of like making sure that certain land-based, community-based organizations or land trust have like a cultural humility, if they're wanting to engage with certain entities. But I just do want to say that, like, I feel like increasing public land holdings is also a way of like increasing stakeholder engagement by virtue of the fact that this is public money being used for public benefit. Versus, I think a lot of other organizations increasingly are having to rely on philanthropy, and that's like a behind the scenes sort of work. So so I just kind of want to like reiterate my points, but with a little bit of more a little bit more finesse, because I think I just sort of was like, where's the cost benefit analysis? So I just kind of want to refine it a little bit. I'd be curious what the rest of the task force says. I do think, though, if we're trying to come to the root of the crisis of unaffordability in agricultural land, there have to be alternative avenues for people to cut their teeth on the land, and also to be able to more effectively democratize the governance of the land through existing avenues like this. So that's just one thought I have.
Thanks for that, Dorian. Really appreciate it. I'm wondering for next steps from here. I think, Dorian, it sounds like you have a response to these ideas that I think could help fellow task force members position or juggle or come to some kind of consensus around these ideas. So I'm wondering, this is for all subcommittee members, should we for October maybe consider looking at that, and Dorian, I might ask if you have capacity to take the lead on this, looking at the recommendations currently in Goal 2 and seeing whether there might be a way to refine that language to capture some of the capacity concerns, like current state of affairs concerns versus vision. And maybe that will actually, I would think, help task force members to reach a consensus around this, so that there is a kind of recognition of current state of affairs and a very clear vision and process that would need to occur to get to the goal that you've been laying out, Dorian. So I guess what I'm proposing is maybe I can assign Dorian homework to go really look carefully at the language as it exists, and perhaps propose some refinement that can come to the October meeting. I think that might be the best way to reach consensus, which is not required, of course, of every recommendation for the task force, but I think is the goal as your bylaws lay it out. Dorian, Nathaniel, Thea, what do you think about that idea as a way forward to get us to October?
Yeah. I'll just say I'm happy to get that homework and explore it, because I would also want to see the balance of it myself
Okay.
through it. So right. So I think I'm just as curious of like actually, like what and just to say I'd be happy to do that homework.
Thank you, Dorian. Assigning you on the spot homework. Nathaniel and Thea, what do you think? Do you think that would be a helpful way to set up October?
I do. I think it's up to Dorian and his time before the October meeting, but I'm always happy to circle back and look at anything in the draft before, or just maybe we're, like we talked about yesterday, Camille, making sure we're flagging these things where so that when the whole task force is reviewing the draft in October, that we can see kind of where those big things happened and next steps.
Yeah, thanks for that, Thea. Staff just talked about this yesterday, and we are developing a plan that will have like kind of a messy flag version of the report that can really point those things out. So we are trying to develop that mechanism and would make sure that this was part of it. Thanks for that, Thea. Yeah. Nathaniel, do you have any other comment here?
Yeah, no other comment. Again, yeah, I think it was just up if Dorian had capacity, but I do think that that would be helpful. I think that I agree, a sort of consensus of how we want to position it, because it's a bit of, we have to address it in if we wanted to, really set in the rest of the recommendations. So yeah, no, I appreciate you being able to do that, Dorian, and the flagged draft at this point, or by October, I think will definitely be helpful.
Okay, thank you all, and special thanks to Dorian for being willing to work with us. So I'll follow up after this, and we'll just make sure you have all the tools. We'll do our best to make the homework as easy a lift as possible. Thank you. Let's move on if you're all okay with that. Looking at the time, 10:12, we're moving right along, which is great. This is also not going to be an easy thing, but looking for any immediate guidance here on the subcommittee. Right now, 2.2C Roman numeral 2 is about prioritizing applicants for funding. So this is a recommendation to increase funding for land access. And then that we can look at it in a moment, but let's stay on the slide just to note that those priorities include community-based and practice cultural humility. And a few different reviewers have flagged that those would be kind of hard as written to operationalize. So just wondering whether this task force had guidance there. Thea, go ahead.
Well, depending on which state agency reviewed and made that comment, it would impact what type, their understanding of that usage of language. I would say our agency does have, at least for community-based nonprofit organizations, there are certain methods that are already embedded within grant program applications. I think cultural humility, also the Office of the Tribal Advisor has a training and very robust definition of what that might include. Now, there may be issues with trying to get that information from either applicants or folks you're working with, or proving that is a little bit more murky, and I don't know if that is like conditional. If we're suggesting conditional, then letters of support are a way for applicants to demonstrate their work within the community and understanding of working with their local communities or certain groups. So I think that there are already established ways in which this can happen, and I don't know if we need to be so specific in our report, other than to say utilize existing program practices. Support letters, I think, also are effective. But this is getting down to the program level of implementation, so I'm not sure if this is something we need to discuss at length, unless others feel differently. I think we can point to some existing definitions or reference that, and that should suffice.
Thanks, Thea. Any response there? Nathaniel, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with Thea. I think that there are a lot of already established languages and like means to evaluate those things. But I do think that I guess I was just confused where this lands. It says C 2.2 C.
Megan, do you mind putting that
And
language up?
it
Thank you.
says providing funding for land trust and technical assistance providers to participate in the trainings.
Oh wait, no, that is not right.
Yeah, that's what I was
Scroll
trying to see
up,
where
it looks like,
oh,
sorry,
up.
apologies at times. Okay, sorry,
It's
it's B,
B.
2.2
Okay, okay.
B, yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I had a
Apologies.
hunch. No
Things
worries.
are changing as we as we move. Things are changing quickly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it right there.
I think I agree. With the we don't. It can stay in as is. We don't have to.
Okay,
But yeah, it is more on the like programming, like having these criteria already built in. But it is important to name those things. So yeah.
that's really helpful. So I'm hearing maybe it would just might require like a little tiny phrase here that note is like using sort of existing program definitions or something like that. We can play with the language, but just noting that these terms need to be defined and they have been defined is pretty much
Yeah, I
the
was gonna
extent
say
of
we have
the need here. Okay.
that in the glossary, right? We have a whole little appendix about the different things. So, you know, I think we're fine.
Okay, thank you. So that sounds great. That's I think what all staff will do is just tweak this language slightly to reference, you know, sort of existing guidance. That sound okay to subcommittee members?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, great, thank you. That was a quick one, I love it. Thank you for your guidance there, please. Oh yes, thank you, you already did move forward. So this is maybe not 2.2D, we'll go and make sure that that number's right. But it says require land trust and community-based organizations to co-create conservation goals with the communities they're accountable to, something. And that's kind of the extent of the recommendation. We can go and look at. Nathaniel, did you want to jump in real quick?
I'm sorry. You could have finished, but I just wanted to note that we actually don't have community-based named in our appendix or glossary
will
of
you
terms.
actually,
So
will you
I do, and I don't know
okay.
that it might add on more. We could already just point to CDFAs or others definitions that are already kind of out there. But just didn't want to lose track of that.
You mean in the glossary, right, Nathaniel? Like it's not defined right now. Okay, we can make sure to define in the glossary using maybe, you know, we can work with Thea and just confirm the program that maybe we should rely on to make that initial. We've used SALC for a few things, you know, just to get the initial language. So that's another option for us. Sorry, the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Program definitions. We've used those in the past.
I would suggest broadening just based on, you know, I think they're even like, you know, building out theirs more because like Dorian mentioned earlier, conservation easements are mainly utilized by I mean just land trusts and private land ownership. So I do feel like CDFA might have a little broader definition there. But and then yeah, I raised my hand because we're starting to talk more about community-based organizations. So I just thought, yeah.
Thanks for flagging that. We'll work to make sure that we have that CDFA definition used. Thank you for flagging. Let's go ahead and maybe take a look at this language if you don't mind, Megan. Really this was flagged by interagency reviewers as well as advisory committee, just that the language right now is very brief. And so they were wondering, what is this recommendation meant to do? You know, what's the ultimate goal here? What does co-create mean? What does requiring these entities to do this work mean? So I think it might just take a discussion here about what this language is meant to do. Is it sort of supportive of these other ideas? Maybe this is in the context of grants. I think potentially that might be where this language got dislodged. So wondering if any subcommittee members have immediate responses to what this language is intended to do, what's the context for this kind of requirement, and then how can we, you know, better refine this idea?
So I can go. Yeah, so this comes out of the way that conservation land trusts, especially when they're engaging with a private landowner, if they're looking to conserve land or put a conservation easement on it, they're usually having to do something that's called like a management plan or a stewardship plan. It has different names, but it essentially outlines like what are the conservation values of that property that you're trying to preserve. And that ends up being a I mean, private process in the sense that conservation land trusts are private organizations in collaboration with the landowner. And so what ends up happening is a lot of the times you have the conservation land trust and their goals and the voluntary easement grantor, which is usually a private landowner, doing most of the decision making when it comes to that. It's not to say that conservation land trusts don't engage in robust community engagement, and I think I would love to maybe highlight the ones that do, especially. But I would want to see that domain of sort of outlining conservation goals, especially as we're thinking of like conservation easements, that does become more of a of a community-based endeavor, so that it reflects the goals and the needs of the community and not just at least in the way that I've seen it, the voluntary landowner and the goals, the conservation goals of the private conservation land trust.
That's very helpful context. Thank you for that, Dorian. Tessa's busily taking notes, so probably some of the language you just shared can be put in here to make it a bit clearer. And I'm wondering whether D actually is just should be Roman numeral 3 under C. And actually one of the questions that I was going to bring to you all, it might even be the next one, is this C is really focused on fund the development and implementation of training programs for land trusts, but some reviewers were saying, why just training programs? Should you fund improved tools and knowledge for land trust? Of course, training would be one piece of that, but I'm thinking that if you maybe C becomes a bit more like fund the development, implementation of better tools that are better aligned with community and ensure adequate training, then I think this D actually belongs right there with that idea. So sorry, there's a few things I just said. Wondering if everyone tracked that and if you have any thoughts.
I'll jump in again. Now that I'm looking at it, I think that's a great way. I was at first thinking, well, maybe this is tribal specific, but I do see that number 1 has a recommendation of them being implemented with tribal nations as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I can see that being put under C. And yeah, I think, sorry, to add more context now that I'm looking at the tribal nations, I think this is one of the frustrations that we've also heard from tribes, especially as they're engaging in land back efforts and trying to take their land back and buy their land back, is that the encumbrances that come with it, like conservation easements, sometimes they just sort of like stifle the vision of what they want stewardship to look like once it comes back into their hands. And so, I think conservation easements are forever, right? So it's like if we're going to create them, we want to make sure that they're actually representative of more of just like is definitely like tribal nations and greater amount of stakeholders for sure.
I agree. I'm okay with moving that to a sub bullet under C. I think it still achieves that. And again, I think, interagency feedback is given from the perspective of the state. So it seems like their worry was just like defining co-create, because that would be difficult and take more time for them to do, and in the context of a state administered program. But I think we need to take that we have a broader perspective here. So yeah, I'm okay to move that in there, and I think it still accurately captures that and the concerns that we've heard from tribes, like Dorian mentioned, along the last few years of talking directly with them.
Thank you. Well, yeah, Nathaniel, go ahead.
I do agree with probably some edits, utilizing some of the language that Dorian was adding to it. I do think that it's one piece I wanted to know was like in collaboration with the communities which they are accountable to. Right now the land trust, like Dorian mentioned, like they're accountable to the private landowners that they hold easements for. That's the basis of the like existing agricultural land trust or conservation land trust. But if this is in three or is a part of C, I do feel like it helps even the already existing programs look at those requirements of like how they should be evaluating what the community-based organizations or land trusts are doing to preserve and conserve the land. Because right now it's very like, are you putting an easement on it? If not, then it's it's the room to make plans. I think we're needing more funding for that, and there is a lot of organizations that are pushing on that edge, but requiring the organizations that will be either holding land or holding easements to have collaboration just opens up more funding for the organizations that are already doing that, and helping shift the ones that can leverage their existing infrastructure to prioritize that more.
Thanks for that, Nathaniel. Yeah, I'm hearing you noting like what is community being another question. Like who are you accountable to as being another point you're addressing, and then making sure that a broad understanding that serves priority producers and land stewards is a key piece of that. So that's what I think I heard you saying there. Hopefully that's
Yeah, and if it's in with C, like it is kind of named
Okay.
the directly served priority producers and land stewards, and
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you all for that. We'll embed that in C. If there are any other kind of revisions or expansions, feel free to note that here. And if not, we can make that change and then move on from this point. Are there any other sort of expansions, revisions that you'd like to see other than moving that D to Roman numeral 3 under C? Okay, thank you all. Megan, if we can go back to slides, thank you. Will you skip, was the one previous what I just asked Megan by any chance? Oh yeah, okay, got it, thank you. If you'll move forward. Okay, so these are all ideas that are additions that come from interagency reviewers. Again, Thea, you did a great job describing the perspective of interagency reviewers. These are things that they're probably working within their own programs, their own work. And so these are just for you to consider. They are if there's not the capacity or the interest to move these forward, that is fine. But wanted to make sure you saw them. One note was that the recommendations right now fund technical assistance providers to support regenerative agriculture, but do not recommend increased funding for regenerative agriculture. I hope that distinction makes sense. So it's kind of, there's a recommendation about increasing support for it, but not increasing dollars to implement. So the interagency reviewers were suggesting that a recommendation to increase dollars for implementation be added. Thea, go ahead.
I think the more specific we can be on that, the better. I agree with that. Considering our current programs and what can and can't, what is and is not already funded.
Thanks, Thea. So by agree with that, do you mean let's develop a recommendation that says increase funding for regenerative agriculture implementation?
Oh, I'm sorry. This says add an entirely new recommendation.
Well, I think we could we don't have to, kind of however you want to make sure that this idea
I don't.
is.
I did not.
Okay.
I misspoke. Then I do not want there to be another. I don't think there should be a whole entire recommendation on this. I think if there's a way to be more specific in what we've currently written, then we can do that. But
Understood.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's revising language that is about regenerative ag, and if it says like fund TA providers to do it, like broadening that idea to say fund TA providers to support and increase funding for implementation of that's kind of what you're noting, Thea.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's two different things. Well, I'm just speaking from the context of our agency, that we have programs that support TA providers and implementation dollars to help farmers and ranchers to implement these conservation practices. Healthy Soils program is one of them. But we also have direct funding that goes to those farmers. So it sounds like this is saying make sure there's more funding for the farmers as well as the TA providers.
Yes.
So under the umbrella of regenerative ag, which currently we support climate smart ag practices. We can point to the definition that the State Board of Ag recently developed. So I think this is a minor point, but we can maybe just refine some of those existing things we've already written.
Understood. We can refine that language for October and make sure it's flagged. Nathaniel?
Yeah, I guess I was reading it as we are currently recommending funding TA providers to support regenerative ag, but we're not recommending more direct implementation. I just didn't know if that was, like, is that somewhere in here that we're recommending more funding for TA providers to support regenerative ag?
Yeah, we can
And
go.
it's the way this sounds, it's like expand funding for implementation. And like I do agree wherever it is that we're currently recommending funding TA providers to support regenerative ag. We also, like Theo was saying, like also for implementation. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't know if that was confusing, but if we know where that already is, that would be helpful to be able to look at that language. But I kind of agree. I don't want to. I mean, we can work this in to something, but I don't want to establish a new sub goal on healthy soils and regenerative ag practices per se.
Perfect. That's helpful. Thank you both. I think you're in agreement that staff should review the current recommendations and just ensure that if we're funding TA providers to support, we should also be, mentioning funding for implementation. And it's just a kind of small rewording there. So we'll review for that and make that change for your review in October. Dorian, did you have any comment there, or does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, that sounds good. No comment on my end.
Thank you. This 2.2C, this was what we just talked about. It's the recommendation about developing a training for land trusts. And then we had talked about ensuring community co-design, things. So the thought was, it's really important to do this work, but right now it's just focused on developing a training program. Can you revise that language to be, develop a training program and make sure that they have the funding to develop, update programs? So I think, there wasn't really uptake of that in the conversation we just had. If anyone wants to return to that, we can, and otherwise we can move on from that and go to this last one.
I'm sorry, could you repeat if we don't have what?
We had just reviewed, and Megan, if you don't mind, let's glance at that language again. We were just talking about this recommendation. It says fund the development and implementation of training programs. Yeah,
I'm looking at it.
Yeah, perfect. So the reviewer just said, it would also be great would be funding the development and improvement of tools to support, so not just training, but like actual mechanism for land trust to use. So it's a very small shift, but go ahead, Nathaniel.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm kind of confused, because I feel like we name in here land trust multiple times as if they're holding and leasing land. And that could be something that we're like trying to push more for, but like that would be, I guess, more community land trust and less on the like conservation land trust. And yeah, I feel like it could get mixed up of like, at first C sounded like, oh, funding SALC and funding like capacity grants to build out organizations and train land trusts to better like work with the communities that of priority producers and land stewards. But can we go back to what was suggested, or just like, so yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little confusing. I'll just pause. I don't know.
That's no problem. If there's I wanted to make sure everyone had the chance to know what was said, but that does not mean the need for, if things are clear as they are, then there's no further need. Thea, did you want to?
Yeah, I just think that I just think we have already talked about 2.2C, and I
Okay.
like what we have in here. This seems already even just jargony reading what this even says.
Okay.
So I just vote to, in our limited time left here, that we maybe get to some other bigger things if we can.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to just name though that like this is stuff that isn't necessarily funded, or is kind of like they're trying to be able to fund it within SALC to, because SALC is supporting land trusts and holding easements, not supporting an acquisition and leasing efforts geared towards priority producers and land stewards. So like based on what we do at Ujima, that's like that would be helping support or help fund this and train within, or like builds capacity grants for that kind of work. So I do feel like it's a good thing to add in, but it's already kind of saying that with C. It's just like it almost could be more like this recommendation that we've got on the slide right now worked into what we had as D, because it's, naming the community-based organizations, but I still do feel like it's all within C because to me it all sounds like the same programs that are funded that I know of.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nathaniel and Thea. I think you're, pointing to, there's a lot of language there right now that addresses what the task force would hope to do. Just a quick clarification, this is not actually specific to Salk, it's saying there should be funding for land trusts to improve their processes, is sort of what that is, just to make sure that was clear. But I hear what you're saying, and I think we can move on from this point and come to this 2.3b. So this is a very specific idea. It's establish agricultural conservation easement purchasing programs at the county and city level. So if you'll go to 2.3b, Megan, this was a suggested addition. So we have state, Nathaniel, you were just talking about the SLOC program. That's a state program that funds the purchase of conservation easements. The recommendation was under this incentivize and support local governments to protect and lease viable agricultural land. The idea was add in here, support for local government easement purchasing programs to mirror the states. Just that was a suggested addition. Any comments there?
I'm sorry, I was clicking back through tabs and trying to catch up to that. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. There was a recommendation to what we're seeing on the screen, this B, incentivize and support local governments to protect and lease viable agricultural land. A recommendation to basically add agricultural easement purchasing programs for the local government so that a local government could fund the purchase of agricultural easements. We have the state version that's primarily SALT because where most of that work is held. So I think it was just a suggestion for how to move that same program idea to the local level. And so if there's no kind of uptake or it feels like it's going to open up a whole new set of considerations, we can move on from that, or you can decide to add that idea here. Seeing no comment, so I'll take silence to mean no further action here. Is that correct? Maybe just a yes or sorry.
Yeah,
that was for B.
Yeah. Yes, B.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just not very, I just don't really understand if if, is that already possible or not?
It's not, that's the hardest part is like when we're talking about this, it's like at this time that would be a public agency, not necessarily a local government and then again, it's like the point I made earlier of like the cities, the local government cities that will have more money to administer all that and have someone, being the landlord, if you will, is yeah, I don't know. I would love to incentivize and support local governments in doing that, but it also just like I don't know how support.
It sounds like maybe the sort of technicalities of what this might mean are not, we don't have a full understanding of that. So at this point, letting that recommendation go, it sounds like that's what the members here are suggesting. So we can do just that and take no action on that particular idea.
Camille, is it possible to ask the members of our task force who are more familiar with this for input?
Okay.
And maybe Dorian is, Dorian, you certainly know more about these things than I do, but or maybe Leah or even Doria, who maybe has experience with this, just to make sure that, this is, yeah, but anyway, I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to make a determination on that suggestion.
Okay. It looks like maybe Catherine Ledan, if you were all comfortable, she's an advisory committee member, is very familiar with this world, has raised her hand. Would you all like to hear what she has to say quickly?
Please.
All right,
Sure.
Catherine, let me allow you to talk. You should be able to speak now. Thanks for raising your hand.
Sure thing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so I hope I can clarify. Their local governments regularly have agricultural mitigation programs and hold conservation easements. I think earlier in this conversation, we mentioned the city of Davis, which is an example of a city, and the county of Yolo County also has a mitigation program. I think probably the private land trust, YOLO Land Trust, holds the county easements, but the city of Davis also holds their easements. And then, as well as local governments, counties, and cities, there are also public agencies like the Sonoma Ag and Open Space District or the Santa Clara Valley Open Space District that actually get tax revenue from their county to support agricultural conservation programs. So thanks for letting me weigh in. I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to answer any other questions about it.
Thank you, Catherine. Are there any task force member questions in response? Yeah, Thea, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Catherine. That's very helpful. What you're saying is what we've written. What we've written here on B, incentivize and support local governments to protect and lease viable agricultural lands. That's already in effect happening, or there are limited cases of that in our state. So
Can you?
do we need to write including easements there, or?
Well, I think that you could all. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think that I would still incentivize local governments. You've talked a lot in this about local land ownership or public land ownership, and I think that that local government at the city and the county and the open space district. I'm a fan of local control in a lot of ways, and so those while there are those programs, and I wouldn't even say they're super limited. I think there are quite a few counties and cities that have these kinds of programs. I would still encourage and incentivize those kinds of programs.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So maybe we should be more clear in this rather than just saying incentivize and support moving up, develop these incentives, because we haven't really talked, if it's already existing, we haven't talked about how to incentivize. How would we incentivize? Maybe if there's another example in other parts of the report, or do we develop an incentive program?
You could incentivize that those programs prioritize priority producers.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
I think a hard part is the urban agriculture. Like there are, more open lands and easements held with cities that are adjacent to farmland. But yeah, and I do think that urban agriculture is still important in those cities as well. But I do feel like there is a how do we support and incentivize the folks that aren't doing it already. I guess that was what I was thinking as incentivize for the like local governments that aren't doing as much agriculture. But again, these are all very nuanced kind of, yeah, I would like to hear what others think on that as well. I know that everyone in the task force comes from different kinds of, spaces in farming. So I don't know if like we could add in about who to prioritize, or like that could be a part of, um it does say such as parks and urban lots, etc., but like broadening that a bit more.
That's something too, Nathaniel, quickly, that there's an urban agriculture working group. Are you on that?
Yeah, I am. That's why I was
Okay,
kind of
so
like
maybe that
speaking
could be a
for,
place to continue
yeah.
thinking there. Catherine, I saw your hand up. I'm noting time. I know, Megan, you're also watching time. Catherine, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just really quickly going to say that one really powerful way to incentivize local governments to protect agricultural land is to include agricultural land as something that needs to be mitigated through CEQA. And I think there are other parts of the report that talk about CEQA and CEQA reform, but those two things are tied together.
Thanks for that, Catherine.
We are going to pivot, folks.
I'm thinking, thank you very much, Catherine. I'm thinking maybe subcommittee members, as you continue to reflect on this, we can go back to Catherine, thank you, and maybe ask for specific language or ideas. If you decide you'd like that, you can let us know. And we can just make sure that that is part of our process. Megan, please go ahead. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. Just keeping an eye on time. If you are joining us as a member of the public and you are interested to share a comment related to Goal 2, this Goal 2 working session, please go ahead and raise your hand so we know to keep a conversation queue. And we'll check on that first, and then there's a general comment session as well. The last two things we had on here in our last couple of minutes are to think about the order of the recommendations within Goal 2 and the scope and level of detail of Goal 2. So any final comments on that from subcommittee members before we turn to public comment? Still time to weigh in on that. So we did a lot of great work this morning, actually a ton of great work this morning. And so maybe hold those questions in your mind when you get the next version of the report, the October version of the report, and think about what might make sense in terms of flow and impact from the reader's perspective. Okay, next steps and assignments. We're pretty clear. I mean, I think besides homework assignment, Camille, did you want to recap this for us?
I can, but Megan, we're still looking at the draft. We're not back to the slides.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I missed it that time. Okay.
There are actually quite a few, thank you, subcommittee members, because I think we have some very clear edits to make. So Tessa has been taking, I'm sure, extensive notes. We will follow up on all of those. So I would say that's a very broad summary. I know, but I know there's a lot of very specific things we discussed. So we will continue that work.
Okay. Public comment related to the Goal 2 conversations specifically. And I'll just remind us of our participation guidelines here, that we generate a space of mutual respect and collaboration. It is totally fine to disagree, but please do not try to ascribe motives or judgments to other people's ideas or comments, and just maintain an air of general conversational courtesy. So Catherine, I see your hand up, but I think it was up before. Can I check in? Are you interested to issue a comment on Goal 2? Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
Okay, great. So I'm Catherine Ledan, and I work as a consultant. My consulting company is Convivial Land Consulting, and I mainly just want to thank you all for the incredible work that you're doing, and I'm learning so much participating. I want to offer my assistance in any way that I can. You're welcome to call me, individually or work with the committee. I'm particularly want to offer my assistance in kind of trying to parse out what the cost benefits of public ownership versus um, public being federal, state, and local, that kind of public ownership versus private land conservation. And I'm happy to work with you guys on that. I have some thoughts about that, and I think that's probably a pretty easy item to flesh out. So happy to help in any way, and thank you so much for including me in the conversation.
Thank you very much, Catherine. We do have general public comment opportunity. If folks joining us today would like to share a comment on anything related to the task force efforts in general, just not just related to goal 2, but the larger scope of their focus. Please go ahead and use your raise hand feature. Anything come through on the written public comment form? We checked a few minutes ago, but hadn't seen anything.
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you, folks. Just to quickly review upcoming meetings. Next week, Tuesday, the Goal 4 Subcommittee meets from 9 to 10:30 a.m. And that's a continuation of their conversation from about 10-12 days ago. And Restorative Lands Subcommittee meets next week, Wednesday, from 3 to 5. That's also a continuation of their initial dialogues. And that will conclude subcommittee meetings in advance of the full task force meeting, which happens October 15th and 16th in Ventura, and also an option for virtual attendance. And as always, we post meeting notes, recordings, and materials to our project website here, sgc.ca.gov/meetings/CALETF/. I think that gets us out just about on time. I really want to thank everyone for your continued engagement and your very thoughtful conversations. We're really moving the ball down the field, to use a sports analogy. I don't know why I don't really even watch sports, but thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you joining us. Happy Friday. You earned a weekend, a well-deserved relaxing weekend in my books. Any closing remarks from subcommittee members or Camille or Tessa?
Just a thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for facilitating us and for the sports references always.
Moving all towards the hoop. I almost blew it, but I got it right. Okay. Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
everyone.
everyone. We'll
Thanks
see you
all. Happy
next week.
Friday.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
I know.
I've got to actually pop off and launch a Zoom right at 11.